The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant. And on today's episode, we're going to take a lighthearted approach. We've covered topics on the Droids Canada Network, droidscanada.com for all of our past shows. But we've covered topics from lockdowns, from the Prime Minister. We've covered COVID multiple times. We've covered some very strange stories from the Communist Broadcasting Corporation of Canada, also known as the CBC. We've covered unions. But today, for our little Christmas episode, we're going to take a lighthearted approach and take a look at some really nice, wholesome stories from around the world. And our first story today takes place in France. Now, this particular article is from the Daily Mail, so it's a British newspaper. And the title will get you in that festive spirit. Now, I want you to imagine sitting down knowing that you're going to be spending Christmas, in the next few days, with a man that shoved a bomb up his bum. In the article, titled, "Doctor, I've got a bomb in my bum. Man 88 sparks hospital evacuation in France after arriving with inserted World War I artillery shell stuck in his rectum." You have to love English newspapers are the best for writing captivating headlines. That's undisputed. And if anyone wants to challenge me on that, I will call you on it. But the English know how to write a headline. Doctors were left shell-shocked after an 88-year-old Frenchman arrived at hospital with a World War I bomb stuck in his rectum. The unnamed senior citizen arrived at the hospital in Toulon, southern France, on Saturday evening in the hope of having the 8-inch artillery shell removed from his anus. His arrival sparked a bomb scare as hospital officials feared the antique explosive would detonate. French news organization Var Matin reported. However, bomb disposal experts determined that there was little risk of the shell exploding inside the man. And there's a wonderful picture of a healthcare professional holding this rather brown-stained bomb in his hand. It is understood that the man had inserted it in his bottom for sexual pleasure. Oh, we could say he was having an explosive time. A spokesperson for the hospital said an emergency occurred from 9 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. on Saturday that required the intervention of bomb disposal personnel, the evacuation of adult and pediatric emergencies, as well as the diversion of incoming emergencies, the spokesperson added. We had to manage the risk in a reactive framework. When in doubt, we took all the precautions. Despite doctors being understandably fearful for their safety, if it were to surgically remove the object, detonation experts were able to put them at ease. It emerged that the bomb was a collector's item from the First World War and was commonly used by the French military in the early 1900s. In what must have been a painful procedure for the elderly man, doctors were able to remove the shell after making an incision. Once it was dislodged from the man's rectum, Doctors measured the shell at 8 inches long, or 20 centimeters, and more than 2 inches wide, or 5 centimeters wide. The hospital spokesperson said the man was recovering well and was in good health. Sexual pleasure, or was he upset that the French team bombed out during the World Cup finals and lost? I'll let you decide. Now, while this next story is not a recent story, it did happen on December 24th of 2021. Now, this is from the Star Advertiser, and the title is Florida Man with Drugs Around Penis Denies They Were His. It's Associated Press. It was from Clearwater, Florida. Florida authorities say that they found cocaine and methamphetamine wrapped around a man's penis during a traffic stop, but the man denied the drugs were his. Pinellas County Sheriff deputies said they stopped the vehicle driving without its lights on at 4 a.m. last Saturday. WFLA-TV reports the driver was arrested on charges of DUI and marijuana possessions. Authorities said they found a gun under the passenger seat while searching the car and discovered the drugs while searching the passenger. If they weren't his, then who put the drugs on the penis? Could this be Santa Claus in Florida, leaving a present around his tree? This next article from 2019, December 26. Florida man arrested for handing out marijuana, quote, because it was Christmas. A Florida man was arrested after he allegedly was handing out marijuana to people as they passed by, quote, because it was Christmas. Police officers say the 67-year-old Richard Spurrier had about 45 grams of marijuana on him when they stopped him around 11 p.m. on Saturday in St. Petersburg, which is near Tampa. When officers questioned Spurrier, he told them he was handing out the weed for the holidays. He was arrested and charged with possession with the intent to sell. Officers also found a sword hidden inside his cane while he was being arrested. Now, I can understand arresting him for handing out marijuana, but if he was giving it out, was he really selling the marijuana? And he's, after all, spreading a little Christmas cheer. 2021, remember, was a pretty hard year, the height of all the COVID madness, and people just need to relax a little bit. And maybe he thought spreading a little Christmas cheer to go along with the eggnog was a good idea. And our final stories are going to take place in Europe. And this particular story comes around the country of Romania. Now, Romania is part of the European Union and was entered in to be part of the Schengen zone, which allows free movement of individuals in the European Union, so you can move and work and visit and travel with little to no restrictions. Now, this is from earlier in the month, and it was December 12th where this all happened. So Europe's passport-free travel zone will be welcoming Croatia, but Romania and Bulgaria have been left outside. European Union countries today voted on whether or not to admit the three nations into the so-called Schengen zone, a pact between countries to abolish border checks for those traveling between their territories. Croatia received unanimous support from the 26 member states. However, Austria blocked Romania and Bulgaria, citing a lack of preparedness. The Netherlands supported Romania's bid, but opposed Bulgaria's. We need more time, Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer said earlier this week. At the moment, we have 75,000 unregistered illegal migrants in Austria, meaning they have crossed an external European Union border and made it to Austria. This needs to be solved first. So it was really Austria that blocked the bid for Romania to join into the European Union. And part of being in the EU is that you would use the euro. They currently use the hybrid system where they use the euro and then they use their own currency, local currency, the lei. Now, on December 13th, the day after, an Austrian food packing manufacturing plant or processing plant in Romania was fined 50,000 lei. So converting that over to Canadian dollars is about $15,000. And the reason why they were fined $15,000 is they were quoted for irregularities. And that's the official word. It was just irregularities. This story was picked up by a local news outlet, Observator, and that was from December 13th. There's audio to go along with it, but I don't think that you would want to hear a minute clip of a woman speaking in Romanian. Now, the story doesn't stop there. So we have, to recap, Austria saying, no, we're not going to let Romania in because of security concerns. Romanian officials say, well, if you're not going to let us in, we're going to fine your companies. Add to that a public outcry of not being let in and a boycott of one of the largest banks where consumers were taking out money. But on December 15th, all of a sudden, and this was reported from hotnews.ro, the Romanian website, a Taliban man who had been expelled from Romania escaped from the center of Arad, which is a city, where he was in custody. There's a lot of excitement. The authorities ordered measures to strengthen the state border until the man from Afghanistan, who was wanted by law enforcement in Arad County after he left an accommodation center where he was in public custody, is found. According to the local media, it is about a young man who declared his membership to the Taliban movement and was going to be expelled or exported from Romania. A man of Afghan citizenship left the foreigners' accommodation center in Horia at the Arad County level. A complex team was set up which carries out activities according to its competencies in order to track down the person. Police and border police employees are engaged in activities of the General Inspectorate for Immigration, also at the level of the border police structures. Measures were ordered to strengthen the state border surveillance device. A permanent contact and exchange of information is maintained with Romanian police crews, such as with other structures of order and public safety, in order to detect the person in question. To date, there is no update to the story if the Taliban man has been captured or where he is at this point in time. Now, do you think after all of this information, Romania has a chance to be welcomed in to the European Union? So from everyone here at the show and the Droids Canada Network, we wish every listener a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And the final gift that we have on today's episode is a message from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister that keeps on giving and giving, from blackface not once but twice, to brownface, to dressing up in Indian clothes and dancing, to inviting terrorists to dine in India, to a Prime Minister that has taxed and put a tax on a tax of a tax. We're going to leave the show with some wise words of Canada's wise Prime Minister. So going back to the 2019, and we've covered this story before, but we'll leave you with these wise words from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
What do you and your family do to cut back on plastics?
We have recently switched to drinking water bottles out of when we have water bottles out of plastic. Away from plastic towards paper, like drink box water bottles, sort of things. There's a number.
So thank you for listening. Have yourself a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and thank you for listening to The Fact Is, and have yourself a great week.
Dun, 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 dun. Salsa shark. We're gonna need a bigger boat.
Throughout history, they have been a part of our Canadian life. Men and women who have made their mission to entertain their fellow man. They've worked hard enough. Isn't it time they had their own podcast?
Droids Canada. This podcast would be great if it wasn't for the internet trolls.
I don't bother them and they don't bother me.
I could do without the bad reviews in the iTunes store.
You have that podcast with that guy who was at that Comic-Con in the last year.
You should hear the barrage of the stupid questions I get on our SoundCloud account. What do you mean there was coughing? How am I going to hear a podcast with coughing?
You feel a lot better if you just rip into the occasional guest.
You're a host who doesn't get paid. You can't just do anything you want while you're recording.
What kind of podcast are you running here anyways?
Droids Canada Podcast present.
You think anyone can see us down here?
Why, you think you want to have sex or something?
Can we?
Droids Canada Podcast. The only show to rip off a Clerks trailer.
You hate people!
But I love Comic-Cons. Isn't it ironic?